When looking at A24 and their ever-expanding library of movies, a campy whodunit that could in some ways be seen as Scream for Gen Z wouldn't really be something that I'd have coined them for. However, with 2022's Bodies, 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 that's actually exactly what we ended up with. Now you might remember back in September when I talked about Ready or Not, which was a fun little horror comedy movie. Well, this movie is one that features the same genre blend and also a somewhat similar setup, which might sound strange, but you know what, I'll explain it soon. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is this great little film directed by Halina Reijn, starring Amanda Stenberg, Maria Bakalova, Rachel Sennott and Pete Davidson. Now, taking into account that this is an A24 movie and they normally like to pad their movies with some sort of social commentary or deeper meaning, partnered with the fact that I do generally just enjoy Bodies, Bodies, Bodies as a fun, campy little horror movie, I thought it would be a fun little palate cleanser after the dread of last month's The Keep to Tapes video to sit down and look at something a little bit lighter. If this seems like something that's your speed, then feel free to come along for the ride. Now, as always, this will contain spoilers for the film that I'm talking about, and I will say that this is yet another film that I would recommend trying to go into blind, so if you've any desire to see this movie and you haven't watched it yet, maybe come back to this one after watching it. I know this is yet another one of these films that I say you have to try and watch this one before coming to watch it, or before watching this video, but I mean it. This is one of those films that really made me leave the cinema with a massive smile on my face, and I'd really love it if more people can experience the ending without knowing about it. So yeah, that's your spoiler warning, and just before we get into things, another quick request that if you do enjoy the content I'm putting out, then subscribing and leaving a like really does go a long way in helping show your appreciation. With that out of the way, let's get into things. The film features a pretty well stacked cast of strong and enjoyable characters, but the two we're introduced to first are Bea and Sophie, who are in what I can only assume is a healthy, happy relationship together. Always a fun way to start off a horror film. I really hope that it stays this way come the end of the movie. After they finish with a brief pit stop, they continue their journey, travelling to the mansion of their friend's family. The friend is David, played by Pete Davidson, and it's being branded a hurricane party because there's a storm, I guess? Yeah, there's not really any profound meaning to the name Hurricane Party, it's just a simple setting to make it so that the characters can't leave the setting in question. Other guests to list them briefly include David's girlfriend Emma, who's an aspiring actress, a podcaster in Alice, her boyfriend Greg, who's a little older than the other guests, and Jordan. Wait a minute, that's me! There's the mention of another guest called Max, however we're told that he left the night before Bea and Sophie arrived due to having a fight with David. The characters in this movie are great. Every one of them is casted really, really well, with the chemistry being instrumental to how well the sense of distrust is conveyed. Each of these actors is able to portray the slow deconstruction of friendship as the night unfolds. They all have their own little moments to shine, and I'm really impressed that none of them really overshadow their co-stars. Anyways, after they arrive and the storm begins, that means it's time to party, and this is a Gen Z horror movie with Gen Z characters, which means this can only be accompanied by alcohol, which is fair, and a whole lot of drugs. Okay, this one not so much. As the night moves on, eventually there's a request to play a little party game called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Now this concept is somewhat similar to a game that I know of, but essentially Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is a murder in the dark style game. The rules, ladies and gentlemen, are simple and are as follows. You cut enough pieces of paper for each guest, with one of the pieces of paper being marked with an X. Every guest draws a card, and the person who draws the X is the murderer for tonight's game. From here, all the lights are turned off, and this then creates the ambience. The group then have to go off on their own and avoid the secret murderer. If they're found by them, they are killed and they play dead, and if that body is then found, the person who finds it screams the name of the game. At the sound of Bodies, 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 the group will gather around the corpse, discuss their findings before eliminating who they think is the killer, and it's just now, at this precise moment, I've realised this is Among Us. The first body found is Greg, and we get this great fake out where we as the audience start to believe he might actually be dead until David manages to force him out of the facade. The group begins to show early signs of fracturing here, where the discussion of the potential killer turns toxic, with David being painted as quite the asshole. Emma isn't entirely innocent either, however it ends with Greg going to bed early because not only is he like twice the average age of this room, but he's also just fed up with David's shit. David also leaves the scene soon after due to his fight with Emma, and I think this is a really well written tension starter. It casually begins to show the strains of several relationships within the group, and that's also an extension of other wary comments that came from Jordan about Sophie earlier on in the movie too. The storm gradually gets worse, which eventually leads to a complete power cut, causing the girls to go searching for another source. Minutes later, as they all separate, Bea stumbles across David outside, his throat slashed with a blood-stained kukri nearby. This is another fun little example of the movie setting things up, with the kukri being another thing that's established in an earlier scene that day. The tension within the group continues to rise, and with the lack of reception, they all decide that it would be a good idea to leave the mansion, a conclusion which really isn't explored enough in horror movies. However, that little expedition ends rather quickly when they find that the battery of the car is completely dead because someone left it running earlier. Suspicion first falls on Greg, which admittedly is justified. I mean, he had genuine conflict with David, and the suspicion is only actually heightened upon the discovery of the travel bag, which contains a knife and a map of the area. This is almost too convenient and almost screams red herring, but again, the reasoning is justified. They confront him after finding him in another room, meditating. He claims he doesn't have any knowledge of what they're talking about, and I actually genuinely believed him here. The heightened panic of the girls against the calm, collected nature of Greg had been knowing that this guy was telling the truth despite the evidence against him, and despite the fact that he was a vet. A veterinarian.
He's a vet? Right? Like Iraq or...
He was a veterinarian. He was a veterinarian's assistant. Are you fucking serious right now?
Then why'd you call him G.I. Joe?
Because! Have you seen him?
Yeah, this is a hilarious payoff where Alice reveals earlier that Greg is a vet, and we're supposed to just fill in the blank, and the girls talking around it makes it seem as though he's some sort of military vet, and it's just never really acknowledged past that. No one corrects it, and we just forget about it, which makes this payoff after Greg is bludgeoned with a kettlebell so much funnier in such a morbid way. It's a shame for the guy, because honestly, he seemed pretty chill and just wanted to have a good weekend, but, life goes on for everyone else. For now. With Greg out of the way, this then means that the killer's identity either resides within this room currently, or it's Max, the friend who had left previously. From here, things only get worse. Sophie, who is a sober addict, relapses. Emma kisses her, which confuses Sophie before Emma takes drugs, and this sounds like a random thing to mention, but it's important because this is the last time we actually see Emma before she also turns up dead, being discovered at the bottom of the stairs by Alice. Suspicion is thrown on to B as Jordan reveals that she did some digging and found that no one with B's name graduated from the college B claims to have gone to. With this being more than enough evidence for these detectives, they kick her out into the rain. She retreats to the dead car, with that being her only real source of somewhat safe shelter, and ends up finding a pair of underwear that matches Jordan's bra in the back seat. Tension with Jordan rises further when, through a window, B can see her holding David's father's gun, having no choice but to come to the rescue, crawling through a pet door. She does confront the three remaining girls, and it's here that we get some of the best comedic writing in this movie, and comedic writing that I've seen in a horror movie in quite some time. I absolutely adore it, so I'm not going to show any of that here. If you want, you can go and watch the film to hear it, or at the very least just go and search it up online, because I feel like I'm doing it a disservice by just dropping it in this YouTube video. We start out with B's honesty, however, as she reveals that she did go to that college, having to drop out though to take care of her mother who had a borderline personality disorder. A fight then breaks out from this. Jordan, who was the revealed killer in the game they played, reveals a lot of hatred towards Sophie due to her drug addiction, and claims that Sophie actually slept with her, meaning she cheated on B. Sophie denies this, and then we get some great writing and comedic beats from the girls, which all rises to the breaking point as Jordan shoots Alice in the leg.
What the fuck?
There's this great moment where Jordan still seems so in shock and convinced that she wouldn't do such a thing that she continues to deny shooting even after it happened, and this then gets followed by a struggle for the gun, which results in a second shot being fired, the bullet tearing right through Alice's throat, sadly ending who is absolutely the funniest character in this movie.
I've never actually said this to anyone, but I have body dysmorphia.
Oh my god, shut the fuck up, Alice.
A chase then ensues as B and Sophie try to receive the gun from Jordan, who is cornered at the top of the stairs. She's finally stopped as she's pushed to her death over the banister. However, rather than spout out some evil villain monologue like the supposed revealed killer should, she instead tells B to check Sophie's texts. This causes B to hide from Sophie due to her growing lack of trust, which is also valid when you remember that we don't have a killer reveal yet, and we know it can't be B. This really does only leave Sophie or some guy we've never even seen in the movie, and who likes that sort of thing? Morning eventually comes, and we're surely getting to the reveal, right? Sophie confesses that she relapsed and witnessed Emma trip and fall to her death. This isn't enough for B, however, who holds her at gunpoint, demanding to see the texts. Sophie, in a completely total act of innocence, throws her phone away as they begin to fight their way towards it, trying to get there first, and accidentally stumble across David's phone in the mess of the storm's aftermath, which amazingly, somehow, still works. And this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is where the killer is revealed, who was behind all of this mania. When unlocking this phone, we see that last night David was trying to show off and look cool and film a TikTok of himself slicing open some sort of champagne bottle with the kukri. And people, there is absolutely no murder. The video shows David slashing his own throat during a misswipe of the blade. The hysteria of this group being down to sheer panic and nothing else is such an amazingly fun twist that I suspected but never fully backed as being the route that they would go down. And the movie ends on this great little line too, as Sophie and Bea remain in the dirt, shocked upon the realisation that the bloodshed was all for nothing. Here we finally get the appearance of Max, who until now has only ever been acknowledged as a suspect, and when he asks what happened, Bea replies simply by telling him she now has reception, and that right there is the end to this completely batshit movie.
I have reception.
There is genuinely so much to love about Bodies that I'm not fully sure where to start. I suppose I could begin with an incredibly bold statement and say in terms of writing, this thing feels like the Scream of the 2020s. Not in terms of quality, don't get me wrong, I'm not willing to put any film on the same pedestal as Scream, that will forever hold its own spot. But purely for the way the writing tends to take on this really meta approach. I know that feels more like a buzzword than anything else nowadays, but I do mean that. The characters feel intelligent, sure, some more than others, but they each feel competent enough to act in a way that people their age in the real world tend to. It's a movie filled with an over-reliance on the stupidity of young adults, one which relies on the constant tendency to overthink and panic that we are faced with nowadays. I mean, hell, that's what the movie's twist is built upon. I don't think I've seen a horror film that features characters that are so fluid with each other in quite a while. Sarah Delap is the person credited with writing the movie based on a screenplay from Kirsten Rupinian. And I have to really commend and appreciate the fact that they clearly prioritised writing some realistically structured characters that could bounce well with one another, knowing that the movie would flow naturally as a result. What has to be one of my favourite aspects of this movie though is the lighting. Now some of you observant little people might have noticed that the entirety of this movie is pretty much spent in a darkened mansion. The only light source, as I described briefly earlier, being phones, glow sticks and torches. This then means that there was no need for external lighting, and every aspect of this movie's lighting comes from the cast. Jasper Wolfe, cinematographer on Bodies, taught the cast how to correctly light each scene, revealing that if any of the girls were to miss their cue by even a second, the scene would be completely unusable. The lighting also has some sort of symbolic purpose related to each character. Bea keeps her phone strapped to her hip, which as a result sheds more light for everyone. It's more of a general focus for a selfless person. Jordan, on the other hand, uses a headlamp, which shows her tendency to just head-on confront someone. Alice covers herself in glow sticks, which is shown as a desire to be seen as fun and at the centre of attention. And the introverted Emma doesn't use one, remaining one of the only people who doesn't, and she is out of the spotlight altogether. I think this is super fucking cool and just adds another technical layer onto this already impressive movie. I love this thing. I think that it has so much going for it. The way it portrays that Gen Z is over-reliant on the internet and their phones is so great, and it mixes humour into this to make it more of a satire-riddled deconstruction rather than an out-and-out criticism of the generation. I also want to give extra credit to the reveal of the character phase, because this thing was such a great ride when it came to the constant suspicion shifting. Before the eventual reveal that there is no killer, there is such a cool little detail that I didn't notice until researching this movie after. And it's another attention to detail in the writing, because if you pay super close attention during the movie, every single person that's accused of being the killer at some point is responsible for someone else's death. You know, besides Greg, of course, but he was never really given a fair shot, so I don't think it's fair to include him. Bodies is a genuine treat. A little gem of a horror film from a production company that I had honestly never touted as one that would angle for this sort of project. However, with incredibly intelligent and witty writing, it's clear that A24 put more than a convincing stamp into the whodunit side of horror. While it lacks a killer with an iconic franchise spanning off of its back, I will still stand by my earlier comparison where I called this Gen Z's rendition of Scream. The general tendency to overthink and panic, rushing to conclusions, being aware of the world around them, both themselves and us, everything is here for a fantastically well written movie, with realistic characters. Each one of them is likeable in their own weird ways. They bounce off of each other as if this is really just young adults having a conversation. I think this movie is really special, and who knows how we're going to end up looking back on this in a few years' time. Personally, I don't believe it has the same staying power as something like Scream, but if we're being honest, that's a franchise, and as far as I'm aware, this is a completely standalone effort. But what Bodies, Bodies, Bodies leaves is a footprint that will last. I do think that this thing will be looked at as something of a checkpoint for modern horror, because even if you think I'm calling it horror loosely, it's adjacent. It still features a lot of tropes utilised by other movies around it. For me, in a few years' time, I do think that filmmakers and writers looking to create the next meta or self-aware horror movie with a dash of comedy will, or at least should, turn to this, because if you ask me, using Bodies, Bodies, Bodies as a base point or a standard for your writing can't ever possibly be a bad thing. So that is Bodies, 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 a film that I have a lot of fun with, and I hope you do too. Please don't hesitate to scroll down into the comments and let me know your thoughts on the film and also the video. I'd be curious to know what you think on it. This was a really weird video to write because despite Google classing me as a part of Gen Z, I felt really weird referring to it from the outside, which made me feel kinda old, and then I remembered I'm wearing glow sticks. There's no reason to feel like that. We're approaching the end of the year, and as it stands I'm still not entirely sure what waits in store for December, whether I'll release a video or take the month off. I would like to try and really nail down consistency this year, so what my plan is possibly taking December off, just getting a head start on some scripts so that I can hit January, hit the ground running, and just keep going with the consistency, because this channel has been smashing it recently. That's everything from me for now though, so if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe. We are now somehow approaching 1.2k already. Let me know what else you'd like me to cover in the comments below, whether it be disturbing, whether it be horror comedy, whether it be a genre in general, like a subgenre in general, because I did a brief found footage one. I'd love to do that again. But yeah, until next time, this has been Media 13. Adios.